good if I introduce you then?
Sure.
Good. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Good evening. I'm grateful for those who could make it out, and I think I see at least that there's one person tuning in on the live stream, so that's good. We're grateful to be able to come together tonight as part of our Lenten preparations for this great Easter season. We've invited Shannon Novak to come in and speak to us about learning more about Mary and this kind of great event in the church that happened just last Friday, the consecration to Mary of Russia and Ukraine and the whole world. Was something that came about after I'd already talked to Shannon about coming out to speak to Mary, to the community about Mary. And so I feel like we influenced Pope Francis in that decision. So that, we'll show what a powerful talk we're in store for tonight. But so Shannon Novak, for those who don't know, she works for Spears Funeral Home in Regina, has done a lot of work with the church in the Archdiocese of Regina. She volunteers on the vocations committee, which I, of course, serve on as vocations director. So that's basically how we know each other. And I know that she's a great, faithful woman and has a great devotion to Mary, too. So I'm grateful to welcome her and hear her speak tonight. So welcome, Shannon.
Well, thank you for having me. As I've said, typically I'm standing in front of people at a funeral service as a funeral celebrant. So I welcome you and extend my condolences. So, seriously, I'm very honored and humbled to be here. When Father Parker asked me to speak tonight about Mary, like Mary, I said yes, not really knowing what I was getting into, but thought, okay, I just am going to offer this to God and trust that Mary will guide me and accompany me, and it'll all be in God's hands. So some of my friends have this lifelong friendship with Mary, and I have not had that. So that was I was kind of, he's asked me to speak about Mary, but so many of my friends are just have so much more to share than I do. And one of them had shared how when her and her siblings were born, her dad took each one of them in front of a statue of Mary and consecrated them to her. And I thought, how beautiful that didn't happen to me, but that's okay. And so I was raised in the United Church. So I grew up hearing about Mary at Christmas time when the Christmas story was read, and maybe at Easter, but that was really about it. Mary was just part of the nativity scene and was Jesus' mother, and that was really about it. And my prayers were always directed to God. And then I came to know more about Jesus and became close to him in prayer. It would make sense as a mother of 6 that I would turn to Mary, but it took some time to first of all remember that she's my spiritual mother and I can go to her, and also that she was the perfect model for me to imitate virtues. I've always wanted to have a deeper relationship with Mary, so I would buy different books about Mary, and I brought several of them here. Trevor gave me this one on Marian doctrines, which I cracked open the other night when I looked at something, but I went, too much. I've got all these other ones. I've got studies that I've taken. So I've got all these books on Mary. So I thought that was a good start. And I looked for years to find the perfect statue because it had to be just right. So I found her in California. She's very beautiful. I found her at a basilica in Santa Clara, and then we were toured around for the day, so she went on the train and all over with me. So she was well-traveled and came back in my suitcase, but I thought she was very beautiful. So I thought I'd bring her to show you. And I've bought many, many more since. I've created a Mary garden in my yard and of many images and rosaries. So that was a good attempt, but I realized that having books and statues and rosaries were reminders of Mary, but they weren't really creating a relationship with her. And I'm not big on reading books. I buy a lot and I have them and I read little bits of it, but my husband informed me that he heard a homily from a priest that he found his vocation because his mom bought a lot of books and he just happened to find one that was there that was good reading and inspired him to be a priest. So I went, okay, well, maybe my books will inspire one of my sons to become a priest, who knows. So in preparations for this retreat, I immediately pulled out all of these books and all of the studies, and I flipped through them all. And I even actually read one of them all the way through. So that was pretty impressive, because I actually just have to read this book. So this book was called Walking with Mary by Edward Shreve. And upon finishing it, I reflected on the many times that Mary accompanied me throughout my life. There was so much more in the book that I wanted to share, but realized that knowledge is important, but is in relationship itself that you truly come to know someone, not just know about them. So the other day when I finished a funeral service, a gentleman came up to me and he said, "Thank you so much for that beautiful service." He said, "Most of the times people are so academic, but you weren't. It was beautiful." I went, "That's right, that's not me. I'm not the academic." So I kind of put the books aside and I thought, you know what? I'm not going to worry about telling you all of these things about Mary that we can find in books. I'm going to just share my experiences with you. So before I share the stories, I want to address 3 things that come to mind when thinking about Mary. So first of all, the power of Mary's presence and learning from Mary's example and invoking Mary's intercession. Those are the 3 most important things. So first of all, the power of Mary's presence and learning from Mary's example. God chose to involve Mary in a unique way in the life and mission of Jesus, in the history of salvation. But how does he want her to be involved in our lives and missions, in our personal history of salvation? The power of Mary's presence reminds us of our desire to grow in Christian maturity and grace. She was a normal human being, except for one thing. From the moment of conception, she was full of grace, full of God's grace. Mary is important for the church because Jesus is important. And yesterday, on one of my emails, I found a beautiful homily called The Presence of Mary. And I thought, oh, perfect. Let's see what this is about. So the gospel reading was the wedding at Cana, where Jesus performed his first public ministry and miracle. The priest shared how his mom was a pretty simple lady who wasn't consumed by worldly things. But the one thing that was extraordinary about his mother was her presence. And he shares the following. "My mother's presence was always the same, no matter what the circumstance. It was loving, accepting, nurturing. In all the ups and downs of growing up, my mother's presence was the one stable and constant reality that I could depend on." Mary is revealed to us primarily as mother. So he goes on to say, in the Gospel of John, Mary is never called by name, but always referred to as the mother of Jesus. In the mind and heart of St. John, Mary is first and foremost mother. She's the mother of Jesus, but she is also our mother, who guides and nurtures our relationship with her son. The servers have run out of wine at a wedding, and it could become a source of embarrassment and humiliation for them. Perhaps something only a mother could see. Mary approaches them and says, "Do whatever he tells you." And why do they listen to her? Most likely they don't know who she is, and most likely they don't know who Jesus is. Yet as soon as Jesus tells them to fill the jars with water, they respond without hesitation. They listen to her because they see and hear in her a mother who cares for them, a mother whose only motivation is love, love for her son and love for them. It is this tender and loving motherly presence that leads the servers to obey her words and to trust Jesus by doing whatever he tells them. The priest goes on to share that when people come to him and are not sure what to do, he has them turn to Mary. He says, tell them to give Mary their doubts, their hesitations, their fears. And once they turn to Mary, it will only be a matter of time before they turn fully to her son. St. Albert says, "Through Mary we have been born, not for the world, but for God. The light and beauty of Mary's presence breaks through our distractions and fears. She shows us not what we are made for, but who we are made for." That was so beautiful. Once we become more aware of the presence of Mary in our lives will never be the same. It is the truth that the gospel reveals to us. It is the presence of Mary that reveals God's will to Saint Joseph. After the Star of Bethlehem, it is the presence of Mary that reveals to the Magi where they will find the newborn king. It is the presence of Mary that strengthens Elizabeth at the visitation. It is the presence of Mary that consoles the apostles after the crucifixion. It is the presence of Mary that will console Jesus for his entire earthly life. From holding him in her arms as a baby, to her initiating his first miracle at Cana, and her remaining faithfully by his side during his passion. Mary's presence is always a comfort and a consolation, even to God himself. May her presence console us each time we prepare to receive her Son in the Eucharist. And one of Mary's titles is Mother of the Eucharist. And Mother of the Eucharist gives us a deeper insight into Mary's ongoing role in bringing us the gifts of salvation. If in the holy sacrifice of the Mass we are truly present with Mary at the foot of the cross, suffering with her Son, then in some sense, every time we receive the Eucharist, Mary is present to us mystically, and we are receiving the fruit of her prayer and suffering into our everyday lives for our salvation. So that was new to me. I hadn't heard that before. That was the one thing when I turned to the back of this big book on the doctrines, I found that and went, oh, I really like that because I hadn't heard that before. I've heard her called many, many titles. So now invoking Mary's intercession. So finding a favorite image of the Blessed Virgin Mary and keeping it in a place where we can see it reminds us of Mary's presence in our lives. So now I've got all these different statues throughout my house and different images. So I'm reminded wherever I go of Mary. So we don't just have them because they're pretty. We have them to remind of Mary's presence. So when we see the image, we are moved to remember that we have a spiritual mother who watches over us. The image themselves also reflect, symbolically and artistically, the beauty of Mary's virtue, the different scenes and encounters from her life. Beautiful Marian images stir up our confidence in Mary's intercession and in the grace of God, encouraging us to invoke her and allow her to share in our struggles and our joys. This morning, one of my priest friends phoned me, and when I mentioned I was preparing this retreat tonight, he gave a few suggestions. He said, it's about relationships. We need to go to Mary, build a relationship with her, speak to her person to person. She's the perfect example of how to live a virtuous life, and she helps us to overcome obstacles. So that was, he said, it's all about relationship. Tell them that, tell them a few stories, you're good to go, and I'll be praying for you. So, and the other thing he shared, another title of Mary that I had not heard. He said, this one I really like, it's very profound. Mediatrix of all grace, that title. And he said, the divine graces don't originate through her, but all graces come through her hands as she adds her feminine touch. I went, wow. So I thought that was really, really another beautiful thing that I hadn't heard before. So now I'm going to tell you a few stories. So when Trevor and I were married, I think most of you here know Trevor, who works here, I wanted to have our wedding in the United Church where I grew up and where my parents were married. So we had a minister and a Catholic priest. And at the time, my favorite song was Ave Maria. So it was sung. And my grandma, who wasn't really fond of Catholics, stated that the priest was fine. He wasn't that Catholic. That was completely fine. But that song, she said that song sure was Catholic. And I thought absolutely nothing of it, because honestly, I did not know that Ave Maria was Hail Mary. I just liked the song. So it's like, okay, well, so I had that sung at my wedding and had no idea. My grandma obviously knew. And after we were married, we attended Holy Rosary Cathedral, where after a few years, I was confirmed into the Catholic faith. And it was funny, yesterday, I was sitting at the back of the Chrism Mass at Holy Rosary, and I looked at the windows, and I went, they are all of Mary. And I thought, I have come into this parish how many times I've glanced at the windows, but never just paid attention that each one was an image of Mary. So I paid closer attention this morning, and I was there at Mass and went, okay, this is really another little gift from Mary that I just hadn't noticed before. I received a rosary when I was confirmed into the Catholic faith, which most people give. And I thought it was really nice, but I didn't know how to pray with it. No one had taught me that it was a gift you give because that's what you give. So a few months later, our oldest began school and taught me the Hail Mary prayer because they recited it at their morning assembly every day. So it was a start, so I started learning at least a little bit. A few years later, our family began attending Cana Colony Family Camp at Kenosi. And every evening, all of the families gathered together and we prayed the rosary. So we actually finally learnt the prayers of the rosary and how to pray a rosary. So we were very, very grateful for that experience. And we took that tradition home and continued to pray the rosary with their family. And it'd always be quite funny because the kids would grab their favorite pillow and their rosary and who's taking which decade. And we had 6 kids and there's only 5 decades. And then I discovered the Franciscan rosary that has 7 decades. I thought I should probably get one of those for a family so we're not having to fight over these decades. But we just continued with that. And when I prepared children for sacraments and adults for RCIA, I made sure that we prayed the rosary together so they would know the importance of the prayers and the devotion and know that the rosary wasn't just a pretty necklace. So another time that Mary was very present was when our 5th child put both of his hands into a boat winch. So you can imagine, he was I think about 8 at the time, and we were cleaning up from the lake, bringing in the boat, and this little guy was busy, and he stuck one hand in this way, he put the other hand in to get it out, and we found him all kind of twisted up in the boat winch. So as a piano teacher, of course, I was horrified if anything happens to your fingers. But what concerned me the most is he said, I can't feel my hands. And I was like, oh my goodness. So there we are out at Crooked Lake. Do you know where Crooked Lake is? It's out by, the closest hospital would have been Melville. So my parents were in Grenfell, that's where I grew up. And I thought, I'm not going to call the ambulance because it will take forever to get here. We're going to end up going to Melville, and I just want to be back in Regina because this isn't good. So we decided to quickly pack everybody up. I phoned my parents. I said, call the ambulance to meet at your house. We've had a bit of an accident with Jordan, and we're going to need to get him to Regina. So we quickly packed everybody up, and it's about probably 3/4 of an hour or so, or half an hour to get to Grenfell. So we prayed the rosary because for Jordan's healing and just for us to all just stay nice and calm, and off we went. So we got to Grenfell and got him into the ambulance, and the ambulance driver said, okay, we need to ask to bypass Wolseley to get to Regina. So they said his fingers are all broken. So it's like, well, yeah, obviously they're, on Bugs Bunny when they used to go through the whatever, and it floats, like that's what his hands were like. They were completely flat. So we got him to the hospital and he went for x-rays, and the nurse came out and I was waiting for her, and she came out just crying. And I just said, well, how bad is it? And she said, it's not bad at all. She said, he's got a green stick fracture here on his hand, and his little finger was a little bit hanging on the end. So he said he needs to have that fixed. But I can't believe it. Like that's all it is. And I said, well, why are you crying? And she said, well, because I said to your son, someone must have been watching over you. And he just went, well, yeah, of course. We prayed the rosary and Mary looked after me. So it was kind of like one of those moments of, okay, we just turned to Mary. But it was not so much that she was present to him, but she was present to that nurse and had that impact on this little boy's faith and how he turned to Mary. So after a year of hand therapy, his hands were back in working order, and he is now a massage therapist. And he claims that God has saved his hands for a reason, and he wants to use them to heal other people and to help other people. So that's his little story. Now I'm going to go back to myself. As a little girl growing up, remember I wasn't Catholic. I remember looking at a calendar and seeing the Immaculate Conception written on the square for my birthday, December 8th. I had no idea what it said or what that meant, but somehow I knew it must be something special. I thought, well, I don't know what this is on the calendar. So the Immaculate Conception is one of the many Marian feast days the church celebrates. And in many countries, it is a holy day of obligation. So now many people think that this day means that was the day that Mary conceived Jesus. So that's the reading we have that day, so they think that. But it was the day we celebrate that Mary was preserved from original sin from the day she was conceived. So 9 months later, on September 8th, we celebrate her birthday. So for 26 years, we attended St. Anne Parish and raised our family there. And it was such a blessing to be at a parish with the name of St. Anne, who is Mary's mother. And over the years, Levoldis High School would have retreats that I would be a part of. So Rob Sean, do many of you know him from here? So he would always schedule those retreats on my birthday, on December 8th. So he would say, oh, well, we can celebrate your birthday, and we can, always include the teaching of the Immaculate Conception. And so he always would schedule them on my birthday, until one day that my birthday was on a weekend, so he had to do it on the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, because he couldn't do it then. So that part of the retreat was also on God's mercy and reconciliation. So as I spoke to the students, I shared my story of how God's grace and mercy and Mary's hand guided me. So this particular retreat was on my 48th birthday, so 30 years after my 18th birthday, right? Well, yeah, okay. But it all came together how Mary was with me at a time that I didn't even know anything about her other than that she was the mother of Jesus. So this is my story. So after high school, I went to Minot, North Dakota to attend college there. And Trevor and I were dating, but decided to go our separate ways due to him was going to Regina, I was going to Minot. So I pretty much figured out that I was pregnant, but was in denial and prayed that it would just go away. Of course, it didn't. I told no one. However, I had gone back home for the weekend, and my parents followed me back to Minot, suspecting that I was pregnant. And the next day was my 18th birthday. And it was spent confirming that, yes, I was pregnant. I had an ultrasound, saw my baby for the first time. I had to decide what I was going to do. And I came to the conclusion that an abortion would be a good choice because I wasn't Catholic. I didn't have that formation or knowledge. I didn't want to have that shame on myself or my family. So I thought, yeah, nobody knows. This is just what we're going to do. Well, I was too far along in my pregnancy to have the abortion in Minot. So wherever it was, we had to fly to. So we were at the airport booking a flight. And it was then that a vision came to mind. And it was a little girl with pigtails running through a meadow of yellow flowers. I don't know why yellow flowers. And she called out them. And that was it. It was like, okay, cancel the flights. We're not going anywhere. So I never really figured out that Mary had her hand. I knew that I was saved in a sense, but it took 30 years to realize that that was Mary that really looked after me at that moment. And then I looked up what the name of the hospital was. Holy Trinity, St. Joseph. I had all the big guns looking out for me, like Holy Trinity, St. Joseph, St. Mary, everyone. So it took a while for me to really see how they played a role in my life until later on. So as I mentioned at the beginning, sometimes we do not know how Mary intercedes for us, and sometimes we discover it even years later. We have many devotions to Mary. And tonight, as Father Parker said, he asked me to speak about the Marian consecration. So I took this directly off the internet because I thought the explanation was perfect. It says, what is Marian consecration? So consecrating oneself to Our Lady is a profoundly spiritual and impactful path to sanctity. One of the definitions for the word consecrate is to dedicate formally, to a religious or divine purpose. Marian consecration is the act of entrusting one's body, soul, possessions, works, and entire life to the protection, guidance, and intercession of Our Lady. The act of entrusting oneself to Mary's care and intercession is nothing new. Jesus himself entrusted his beloved disciple John to Mary while he was on the cross. The early Christians and church fathers recognized Mary's holiness and her significance as the Mother of God. We've been asking for Mary's intercession and intervention in our lives since the beginning of the church. She is, after all, our mother too. A more formal method of consecration to Mary was developed by St. Louis de Montfort in the 1600s. His 33-day prayer consists of short instructions why one would even consecrate themselves to Mary in the first place, and praying the rosary and other various prayers to Mary and God. This period of prayer culminates in a beautiful prayer of consecration that one makes in conjunction with the sacrament of reconciliation and the reception of Holy Communion, ideally on a Marian feast day. Why should I consecrate myself to Mary? Consecration to Mary is simply a furthering and deepening of our devotion to and relationship with Jesus through Our Lady. If you already have an affection for Mary and talk to her often, consecration is a natural next step. But even if you don't really know Our Lady yet and aren't convinced, Marian consecration could be that bridge that unites you to her more deeply. When we consecrate ourselves to Mary, we give her our entire lives and selves, as well as the merits of all our prayers and works in order to become more fully to our Lord. We give Mary everything we are and do to present to the Lord and use at her disposal. Why give Mary everything? Because she's a good mom. She only wants what's best for us and for all her children. Mary wants us to know, love, and serve Jesus more. She wants us to get to heaven even more than we do. She's invested in our happiness, both temporal and eternal. Mary takes all the good we are and do, adds her grace, and presents to us her Son. The best part, when she presents us to Jesus, in our littleness and with all our feeble efforts, he does not refuse her because she never refuses him. So the question was, can't I just consecrate myself to God? Yes, and ultimately that's exactly what Marian consecration accomplishes. When we consecrate ourselves to Mary, really we are consecrating ourselves to Jesus through Mary. We are so intimately united that truly giving ourselves to Mary can lead to nothing but total surrender to God. By consecrating ourselves to Mary, we leap with faith and joy into the arms of our mom, knowing that she advocates for us, loves us, and wants to see us become saints. We cannot go wrong with the Marian consecration. So my son Donovan, his birthday is April 28th, which is the feast of St. Louis de Montfort. So he has done St. Louis de Montfort's consecration, which is way too difficult for me to do. It requires a lot of prayer, but he's goes hardcore on it. So this one, I don't know if anyone has seen this, the 33 Days to Morning Glory by Father Michael Gately. I think it was published in 2013, but it was in 2014 when I got my hands on it, and a group of ladies and myself gathered and we prepared for the consecration. And I had just started preparing for it when our oldest daughter got married, and she got married at Kenosha, and it was pretty laid back. So I went off to the church to put some flowers in it for her wedding and took my book and prayed there. And I was so glad I was at the start of this, so I could, consecrate their marriage to Mary and to just really be more in touch with what this consecration was going to be. So we made that consecration on September 8th, on Mary's birthday, at St. Anne Parish. And if you've ever been there, Mary's statue she's Mary in motion. which it's hard to tell that it's Mary. So we brought our own statue and we sang Marian hymns, and it was beautiful. And I didn't have mine at the time, but another lady had hers. And she was pretty big. So I went and picked her up, and we had her covered with a towel. And on our way back, she lived in Roberts Plaza, the big high-rise building. And we got onto the elevator with Mary, and another gentleman came on, and he's a very devout Catholic, so he kind of looked at us, and he looks, and I pull up the towel, and I said, "It's Mary's birthday. We were taking her out in the town." And he's just like, "Okay." I said, "No, we just had a Marian consecration. We needed her, but we just like to have a little bit of fun with Mary too. We thought we'd take her out for her birthday." So in the book, 33 Days to Morning Glory, Father Michael Gately breaks down each week featuring a different saint. And he uses St. Louis de Montfort, St. Maximilian Kolbe, and then at the time he wrote the book, it was Blessed Mother Teresa and Blessed John Paul II, who are now both canonized. So by imitating de Montfort's example of going to Mary, depending on Mary, and being with Mary, he says, when the Holy Spirit, Mary's spouse, finds a soul united to Mary, he flies there. He enters there in his fullness. He communicates himself to that soul abundantly and to the full extent to which it makes room for his spouse. May we go with great zeal to give ourselves completely to Mary and allow the Holy Spirit to fly to us and fill us with holy passion and fire. But that was really cool. The Holy Spirit always makes use of Mary to give birth to Christ. And the more he finds a soul that is united to Mary, the more active and mighty he becomes in producing Jesus Christ in that soul, and that soul in Jesus Christ. So you make that consecration and think you're giving yourself, but then there's lots that gets asked of you too. But I think it's beautiful because you're united to Christ. I just want to share a little bit out of this book. This was continuing of St. Louis de Montfort. He was calling the consecration a gift. He says this: if only we have the courage to give ourselves completely to Mary, then we'll experience Mary consecration as an incredible gift. Moreover, the more we give ourselves to her, the more we'll experience the greatness of this gift. We give, and she gives back infinitely more. We give her our sinful selves, and she gives us her immaculate heart. We give her our own meager merits, and she not only augments and purifies them with her perfect love, but gives us her infinitely greater merits and graces. We become empty after having given her all, and she fills us with the Spirit of God. She cares for our family, friends, and our loved ones on our behalf, even better than we ourselves can. She anticipates our needs and orders every detail of our lives for the greater glory of God. The path of holiness with her is a path of roses and honey, compared to walking it without being consecrated to her. Indeed, she makes even our crosses and trials into something sweet. Moreover, she protects us from temptation and the attacks of the evil one. Belonging completely to Mary is the quickest, easiest, and surest way to Jesus. If we were to fully realize how great a gift consecration to Jesus through Mary is, we'd almost never stop smiling and praising God for giving it. And St. John Paul II's prayer to Mary is, I belong totally to you. All that I have is yours. I take you for my all. Oh, Mary, give me your heart. So there's all kinds of stuff on his devotion to Mary. I mean, to talk about Mary is endless. There's devotions, there's all kinds of different titles she has, and many saints have a true devotion to Mary, so it's not like it's just a few people. So one of the fruits that I believe of my consecration to Mary is the spiritual motherhood of priest's apostolate. So I wondered why God kept tugging at my heart to do something for priests. And he did that for years and years and years. And I would have priests and seminarians coming and confiding in me. It was like I was hearing their confessions, and they'd share things with me. And I thought, why? Like, what do I have? And someone said, well, you're a mom. You're a mom. That's why they're coming to you, that you're a mom. So he planted the seed so many years ago and prepared me, but it wasn't until two things happened that this finally became a reality. God changed how he wanted me to serve him. I did not understand it, and I had to unite my heart with Mary's, trusting that God had a different plan for me. And the second, the priest who had begun this idea with me passed away. So if you know Monsignor Ken Miller, so I'll share a bit of this story. He gave me booklets in 2007 that talked about the sanctification of spiritual motherhood and praying for priests. And he said to me, do something with this. So these are all these years of me waiting to do something with it. So when my way of serving God had changed, and when he passed away, within 2 weeks of that time period, I thought, okay, I think now is the time that he's telling me to do something with this. So we did something with it. We got it started. So the spiritual motherhood of priests is where a mother will adopt a priest as her priest son and offers sacrifices and praise, offers to Mary her prayers, and tries to imitate Mary and her virtues. So if you want to learn more about that, I will tell you more about it later, but I've got some men here, and I'll figure out what I can do for you guys to pray for priests, but right now I'm just working on the moms. You have priest cards that Father Parker will share with you this week to pray for priests and for vocations. So you men aren't off the hook at all for this, but this is our little thing with Mary. So I want to show you an image that we use, that is our image for the spiritual motherhood. Apostolate. All of you see this? Can you see that? Is it glaring or can you see it? Okay. So when you look at this picture, what do you see? When you say it, I'll say it again so people who are watching online can hear. So, okay, sorry. Okay. A mother and her children. Mm-hmm. I should have brought images for you to look at a little more closely. It's hard to see from way back there. Sorry? Oh, clouds look like wings. Oh, I haven't noticed that one before. We've talked about the clouds, but they do look like wings. She's what? She is leading them. Yeah, she's got them by the hand and is leading them. You maybe can't see, has bare feet, so she's likely poor. Her clothes are pretty nice though. Anything else that you notice? Do you know who this is, or why this image was chosen? Well, the painting is called A Virgin, so we assume that the middle lady is Mary. Now, there isn't a lot said about it. The artist used his children as subjects to paint the picture. But a lady had brought this image, and she spoke about it. And her interpretation, which she uses, she works in vocations in the States. We look at Mary. This is Mary. This is her son Jesus and John the Baptist on this side. His hair is a little rougher looking, so he's John the Baptist. But it's really, whenever we see Mary and think of Mary, we think of her in a praying mode, right? Because that's just what we think. We always just think of her as purple, which she is. But she also is a lady on a mission. She's got these two by the hand. She's walking with determination. Father Parker, you want to share your story about the leaves up here? I don't know if you can see, but there's leaves up here.
So I feel like that's a symbol that she's leading them towards the tree of life or the cross, right? That the tree's obviously like what they're headed towards, and so maybe that's the cross that they're headed towards together.
There's lots to find. Someone even said, "Oh, is that like it looks like a snake going over Jesus' head?" And I said, "I think it's part of her garment." And then yesterday, someone said, "It looks like she's got two arms." I said, "I think that is a piece of her garment as well." But we see all kinds of different things when we look at it. But we just know that, Mary is a doer too. Do whatever she tells you, or do whatever he tells you, right? So we have to always remember that she has a mission, we have a mission, and we go to her and she'll help us accomplish what we're asked to do. So I love this. We want to always be ourselves, but we always want to be like Mary as well and imitate her virtues. So when you think of Mary, I don't have anything more to say, so I'm going to ask you guys. When you think of Mary, what do you think of? What comes to mind? Gentle, warm.
I always think about the scene from The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson's film where the adult Jesus carrying his cross falls, and it's kind of paralleled in an image of Mary running to the child Jesus, like falling when he's just playing. And this idea that as a child, when Jesus was a child, Mary could run and comfort her falling son, but then she has to watch this crucifixion where he falls and there's nothing he can do for her, or she can do for him anymore. But then the like powerful mourning and negativity or whatever that must have for a mother, that challenge. But then obviously we know it's not completely negative, right? It's the crucifixion, and so it has a good ending, but a lot of suffering along the way.
We had the priest, Father Bertunik, who was the spiritual director on site when the Passion was being filmed. So he's got a book called Inside the Passion, and it's quite fascinating. And he's shared stories. He's visited here in Regina a few years ago, and he has many online retreats, which I would encourage you. I've used them a lot with my ladies group, so that's something your parish could certainly use because they're beautiful. He has just a really wonderful way he gives little meditations and questions for you to think about, and then kind of concrete things to do. But he spoke particularly about the scene where Jesus is under the ground, crowned with the thorns. It's before, it was after his scourging, but before the actual crucifixion, and where her head, had her head to the ground. And he explained how many takes they had to do to get that just perfect, to really portray her, how they wanted Mary to look in that. So do you have any other Marian devotions or things that you, like most always just associate the rosary? And the priest I spoke with this morning, he said, yeah, a lot of people, they pray the rosary and they go, yeah, I've got a great devotion to Mary. But he said, they're just rambling off Hail Marys. He said, well, they're just rambling off Hail Marys. He said, it's better to say one Hail Mary with, true feeling and that closeness to Mary than to just ramble off a whole bunch. So he said, sometimes we get so used to the things that we're used to, and then we don't really think about what we're doing anymore. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Because I know I change it up a lot because I've got certain prayers, but after a little bit, you end up just reading words, and I need a different one that kind of says the same thing. So I'm actually concentrating on what that is. So we have, in our ladies group, we have a virtue party each year. And at the beginning of January, we get virtues that we work on for the year. We have them put on mugs now with a saint. And we had one that was called The Kiss of Christ. And whoever got that one had a horrible year. And we just went, okay, this is like getting the old maid card. Like, nobody wants this virtue. Why do we keep putting it in here? And then, who's going to get that one? So we took it out. But then now, when you think, again, and even of the scene in the Passion, when Mary is at that foot of the cross, she's right there. And Jesus is so close to her that he can kiss her. And now we're going, oh, that's actually really beautiful when you draw so close to Christ that he can kiss you. It's not the old maid card at all. It's actually really beautiful when you can completely unveil yourself and be there with her. And I had a rosary given to me, and I have misplaced it, which makes me really sad because a cousin of my mom's got it from Lourdes and mailed it to me, and it was beautiful. And on the crucifix, it was a very different crucifix. It had Jesus on the cross, but it had Mary holding a chalice. And I went, I've never seen it before. It was so beautiful. It was my favorite. And I took it on a cruise with me, and that's when COVID came and we barely got home. And I don't know if I lost it on the cruise or if I misplaced it when I got home, but well, maybe when COVID's over, it'll miraculously turn up again, because it was just one of those really special rosaries to me. And one day I was driving the funeral coach out to Crono, to St. Peter's, and the fellow I was driving had the most beautiful obituary of his devotion to Mary and just his love of the church. And I thought, you know what, I am not going to waste this moment with this guy that I am driving. I pulled out my rosary from Lourdes because we were going to, the colony is, the Lourdes, and I went, I am going to pray my rosary with this guy behind me because I don't want to just not take this opportunity because I've got time. I'm driving, we're driving slow, and that was just one of those moments where I just thought, this is beautiful that Mary's allowed this, that I was in that place at that time and with my rosary from there, but now I don't have it. But if you're familiar with Laudate, I know you've got the Halo app out there. Did you speak about Laudate, that app? It's beautiful. There's lots on there. And today, of course, is the Sorrowful Mysteries. And the fifth one, the Crucifixion and Death of Jesus. It says, standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary of Magdala. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there, whom he loved, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. And then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. And it says here, Jesus wishes to see us close to his mother. He wishes that, like children, we keep our hand in the hand of Mary. That is what he wants. He asks us to look to the Heavenly Mother. That is to depend on her. He asks that we accept Our Lady as our true mother, who will ignite us in a fervent love for her Son. Mary, we trust in you. Take us and put us in the refuge of your immaculate heart. Heal with your humility our pride that so often takes us far from God. So I don't know if I can answer any of your questions or not, because I'm not an expert on Mary. I have a heart relationship with her, and that's as I've come to know. I'm not the academic, I'm the heart person. So if you want the academics, don't call me in. So if there's no other questions, or we can visit after too. I think we'd like to close in prayer. Now there's a few prayers that are, well, there's lots of prayers of Marian ones. There's the Memorare. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that one. Or it's the consecration to the Blessed Virgin Mary as well. So maybe I'll read that one, and then we'll pray together. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Mary, my Queen and Mother, I offer myself entirely to you. As an expression of my devotion, I consecrate to you today my eyes, my ears, my tongue, my heart. In a word, my entire being. Since I am utterly yours, dear Mother, keep and defend me as your very Amen. Together, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
So thank you again for inviting me. It was wonderful to come out and share with you.
So Shannon, just before you take off and pack everything up, I just have a small token of our appreciation
Thank
from
you
the
so
parish.
much.
So grateful for your witness, for your sharing. I think for me anyway, heart sharing is way more important and way more beneficial to my faith life than academic sharing. Maybe that was just 6 years at the seminary though. So
You can
that
borrow,
drilled me out.
you can borrow my books and if
So,
you want to learn
so thanks
more.
again, Shannon, and we look forward to growing in our relationship. So.
Great. Thank you.